Hey everyone. Okay, so this video is going to be for the elements of fiction. Give me 1 second. Okay, so like I said, we're going to do the elements of fiction. I'm going to share my screen in about 2 seconds once I find my document that I want. Bear with me. Share screen. Share screen. Go. Okay, so this is the elements of fiction. All of the pieces that you have read. So this is going to pertain particularly to 102 students who have read Where Are You Going? Where Have You Been? The Yellow Wallpaper, A Rose for Emily, A Good Man Is Hard to Find. What else do I do? There's usually a few more that I litter in there. But you're going to use this particular document and the reading. So you're going to couple them together for when you write your reader's response, which is a separate video on how to do that. So there's a few elements to it, okay? As you can see here, okay? There are 6. It's not that bad. I'm not going to read through this whole thing. Okay, so your first one is going to be character. A lot of times people think that the setting is going to be the most important. Yes, it's important. Each of these elements are equally as important. However, your characters kind of make your entire story, as we pretty much know, okay? So is there going to be a conflict? What's the emotional or mental condition of our characters? As we know, for Rose for Emily, it's a little unstable. Somewhat the same for Where Are You Going? Where Have You Been? And then again, for A Good Man Is Hard to Find. But then again, they're all kind of traditional Southern Gothics, except for Where Are You Going? Where Have You Been? That one's not considered a Southern Gothic. So you want to know backstory, or you need to at least have a very small backstory that is given for these characters. What is it? You need to have an understanding of some type of psychology, okay? So for when we dive into Where Are You Going? Where Have You Been? There is much more of a psychological component to that particular story. Yes, there is some to Rose for Emily because it makes you think about that necrophilia act at the end. You know, and the whole, it all just kind of ties together. I don't want to get too much into those stories. I want to focus more on this. And then what's their character arc? Are they going to be flat, or are they going to be round characters? And when I mean flat, I mean that they don't change. Flat characters do not change. They stay the same throughout the entire story. If a particular character is kind of a jerk, they stay a jerk. They don't morph into the, like, I see the light, I should change my ways. Okay. If they were to go from a jerk to a nice person, that would be a round character. Okay. It means that they've changed. Again, that's right there. Okay, so the next one is plot. Obviously, we have to have a plot. We have no story. Okay. So you can't, you know, as I say right here, you really can't have a plot without having characters. You can have a storyline in your head, but you need to have characters that are going to fill in that storyline for you, which is why characters are kind of higher up than plot in the list of priorities, I guess. Okay, so it's the blueprints. It has to have connections. It has to have structure. You have to shape it certain ways. The plot is a lot of times what people don't like, in particular about A Rose for Emily, because of the way Faulkner structures his story. You know, how does your character face an obstacle? How is it, you know, when we think of plot, we go back to high school or maybe middle school where we learned this, where we learned the exposition, the introduction, the rising action, the falling action, the climax, the resolution. Okay, that's your arc of your story. Okay, so the exposition is going to introduce everything: your characters, your setting, your time period, all of the details you need to get through the rest of it. Your rising action, what's the conflict, what's happening, and this is why I think in particular that Faulkner's story is hard to get through, because it does not follow this linear path. It kind of goes like this everywhere. Then we have the climax, which is the turning point of the story. And then the falling action, things start to wind down, that tension's kind of released. Things are being resolved, problems are being fixed. That bow is about to be tied up nicely for the resolution. Okay. Obviously, it doesn't mean that it's happy or a sad ending. It just means that it's coming to an end. Okay, there's a conclusion. Here we are. This is how things end. All right. Third element is setting. Your setting, you know, you can't have A Rose for Emily characters and their character traits in, I don't know, Hong Kong. It doesn't work. It doesn't fit. Okay. So its setting is almost like its own character, because your setting has to set that stage for your characters to interact. Okay, so like without the appropriate setting, your characters aren't going to fit into place. Everything they do, everywhere they go, it has to help them in their storyline and their arc or their plot, I guess we could say. Okay, so it determines a lot of things: the skills they develop, the tools that they have. Okay, so like for Emily, you know, that she really had no tools. For Arnold Friend, from Where Are You Going, Where Have You Been, that he's just very cunning and conniving and manipulative. Okay, those are his skills and his tools. For the misfit in A Good Man Is Hard to Find, he has very similar tools and skills to that of Arnold Friend. The presuppositions your character brings into the story, whether they're religious or they're psychological issues, philosophical, you know, things like that. So like Miss Emily, she brought into the story with her that she did not pay taxes in Jefferson. Connie in Where Are You Going, Where Have You Been is kind of an airheaded teen who's really into herself. Those are all of those presuppositions that are explained in that exposition, the beginning of the story that we have, that are part of the setting. They set that scene for us. They set that character. Okay. All right, so we're gonna carry on, but also with setting, you know, in particular with A Good Man Is Hard to Find and A Rose for Emily, there are some historical contexts to it. So like A Rose for Emily revolves around the time of the Industrial Revolution as well. So that's, you know, that's why the sidewalks are being paved, mailboxes are being put up. A Good Man Is Hard to Find is a very post-Civil War piece, okay, because they talk about how there were plantations and there were maids' quarters and maids' you know, or butlers' stairwells that were different from the stairwell from the main house to be used, and things of that nature. Then we move on to the fourth element, point of view. Okay, point of view can be a little difficult sometimes. It is tricky because when we think of point of view, we think about writing, we think about how we like to write in first person because it's easier. Obviously, we can't do that in English setting most of the time. However, for your reader responses, you're going to write in first person. What was I going to say? Sorry. So you have your first person, I, my, me, and then second person, you and your. Third person narrator, it's like she or hers, he, him, they, them, their, people, persons, readers, viewers, listeners. Okay. There's present tense, there's past tense, and then there's of course future tense, and then there's, you know, super fun because English is just fantastic. Past perfect, present perfect, past participle, present participle, or, you know, future perfect. We have so many tenses that we don't even realize that we have to use because we were never actually taught them. So don't tell anybody I said that. Anyway, so it depends, you know, your point of view of the story depends on which direction you really want to take it. So for instance, all of these particular stories that we have now read, Rose for Emily, Where Are You Going, Where Have You Been, A Good Man Is Hard to Find, you can argue if you want that they're second person, but they're not, they're third person because they're used names. It's third person omniscient. It's somebody telling the story. It's a narrator telling the story. Okay, so different genres are going to use different tenses. You know, for example, when Twilight came out 1,000 years ago, I don't know how long that was. I was a junior in undergrad when that came out, so I don't remember. But it was Bella's point of view. So she used I, but we learned very quickly that she was the I. It wasn't like the author. And then they switched it when Stephenie Meyer came out with Midnight Sun, which was Edward's version of their interactions. Okay, same thing with E.L. James when she came out with 50 Shades of Grey. It was all from Anna's point of view and not from Christian's. And then she said she published Grey, which was his point of view, which is very interesting to do because obviously it does give us a different side of things. Anyway, I digress. Literary fiction typically uses third person, like I said earlier, because then it has a broader scope, and we're allowed as an audience and as a reader to see more of what's going on. If we stay in that first person, we are only limited to what they see and their actions. We don't know what this person is doing over here because the narrator is looking there. Okay, so when we have third person, we're allowed to see all of the moving parts happening and know things before our characters know them. Okay, that goes to this part, the how much does your reader need to see? Is it essential? Okay, so these are just things to think of as you start to do your reader response. The fifth element is going to be theme. Okay, so it's a hidden element. It's still important. It's what your story is truly about. Okay, so Rose for Emily, what do we think it was really about? Tradition, change, manipulation. Where are you going? Where have you been? Again, I'm going to go with manipulation. Everybody has different interpretations. Your interpretation is not wrong. Okay. A good man is hard to find. I would say that's the theme, is that people are good men. Okay. And the definition of good, or the dichotomy of good and evil. What makes a person good? What makes a person bad? And why is it so respective to the person that's looking at it to define it? Okay. So that's kind of what we mean by theme here. Okay, then we move on to our sixth element, which is style, which is the voice. Okay, it's the tone that's setting this all up. Okay, so it could be something that is written with a dark sense, very Edgar Allan Poe, or something with like a, you know, a fun sense. Roald Dahl, you know, he wrote Matilda. This is something that is very hard to hone your skill on, only because it just takes time. It is something that does take time. And the problem here with style is that a lot of people think that they can't have their own voice or their own style in their writing because they're trying to adhere to the conventional rules of grammar. So the best thing that I could say for trying to develop your style or determining a style is if you read a lot and you write a lot and you listen. Okay. This is a lot. Yes, it's a lot. However, these elements all are part of those stories that we read. So try to pick apart what you can. Maybe you want to compare all three of them. I don't know. Your reader response is going to be your own. You're allowed to do what you want with it. It's allowed to be in first person. Again, I'm going to go over this in another video. So that's all I got for elements of fiction. Hopefully this was fast enough for everybody. And I will see you guys in the next video. Bye, everybody.